I want to begin this video with quite a philosophical question that I want you to keep in mind and think about while you watch. Why do you care about anything that happens in a story you read? No need to answer that now, but just think about why is it that books often carry a much different weight than other forms of media. In the case of Stone Ocean, after finally getting a solid look at what's in store for the next adaptation, I think this would be the perfect time to talk about the quite controversial ending that is Part 6, as we will no doubt be returning to this discussion with many more eyes on it once the anime rolls around. So, first and foremost, let us go over the events of the finale, as I've seen quite a bit of confusion here as well. We'll begin at chapter 149, where Pucci is already entering his endgame, and starting with Pucci's motivations. His ultimate goal was largely fueled by Dio, who believed that true heaven only exists if one can know their fate. While this may seem a little random on the face of it, you have to remember that Dio had lived his entire life being defeated by the Joestars time after time. So if he were to achieve this goal of knowing his true fate, he would not have to constantly fear about what might come next. And so, after the death of Dio, Pucci continues his mission by melding with the green baby that holds Dio's soul and acquires the legendary stand made in heaven. This stand has the power to accelerate the flow of time with the control of gravitational forces, which is of course the origin of the legendary meme of "Do you believe in gravity?" Now commanding a power that far outclasses even Star Platinum and the world, Pucci brutally kills every member of the gang except Imperio, who manages to survive. He then begins to accelerate time, but not for living creatures. Remember that his goal was to achieve the state of knowing your own fate, so wiping out all life is not what he wants. Time continues to accelerate until finally, Pucci seemingly achieves his goal of a new cycle. This is explained pretty well in the manga. The whole cycle of a universe thing is very much a real theory on how our own universe began and might end. In story, however, Imperio is still alive, and with Weather's stand disc in hand, he manages to kill Pucci in their final battle. But in one last desperate attempt to achieve his goal, Pucci attempts to reset the universe again, only this time, he himself would never be in it. So at this point, Imperio is the only one who has lived through the cycle, so his memories of the events are unchanged, which is when we arrive at the final chapter. With Pucci no longer existing in this timeline, Jotaro's life after the events of Part 3 are changed, but only with respect to the events involving Pucci. Everything else happens exactly as it did. The events of Part 1 to 5 play out the same. The only instances of history being changed are the ones caused by Pucci, which is exactly why we see that Jolene's name is now Irene. The JoJo acronym is gone. We know that in the world of JoJo, some people and some bloodlines are drawn to each other, but with the threat of Pucci and by extension Dio being gone, there is no need for Jolene to fight anymore. There is no need for a JoJo. We still see that Jolene, Anasui, and Hermes meet up, but under much different circumstances. And one of the final panels shows us that Weather also still exists in this world, but his fate is also much different to the original timeline, as Pucci would have never interfered with his life. And on that note, that is the ending of Part 6. So in short, with Pucci no longer being a threat in this universe, the Joestar bloodline does not need to fight this day, and so Jolene is not a JoJo. But why is it so hated? Well, as far as I gather, the main reasons are Pucci wiping out the entire gang and essentially winning, and the other is the universe resetting. But to talk about these two factors, I want to return to the question that I brought up at the beginning of this video. Why do you care about a fictional universe, specifically when you read it? I think generally speaking, a lot of the criticism against the ending of Stone Ocean is based on emotion. Not all, of course, but a lot of it. When we watch a series animated or live action or any other medium that gives you more sensory data than simply reading it, there is much less room to fill it with your own imagination and interpretation. This has been the downfall of countless adaptations. The way that the author views the characters can be vastly different to the way I view them, and that will be just as different as to how you view them. There is a lot of personal attachment there, which is where I think the hurt of this ending comes in. Firstly, we see something that is actually fairly rare in JoJo: the protagonists being completely defeated. With the exception of the Part 1 ending, this does not really happen. We always lose some Jobros along the way, but ultimately they are victorious. In the case of Stone Ocean, that does not really happen. You know the common adage of a person only dying once their name is no longer spoken. Well, not only do we see our characters brutally killed, their names also do not exist. There is no Jolene anymore. And after you've read the story for many hours, you've built this world up in your mind, you've filled in the many blanks that such a medium brings with your own interpretations, in some part, this is your story. And now all of that was wiped away. It's no surprise that many people are very much against this ending, especially with Part 7 and Part 8 taking place in a completely different universe. For all intents and purposes, Part 6 ended the first world of JoJo. And I think it is this emotional reaction that immediately makes people disregard the entirety of Part 6 simply based on the ending. There's a much longer discussion to be had here around the importance of the ending and how that colors our views of the story as a whole, which we will surely have at some point. But in the case of Stone Ocean, I think there are some external factors that we also need to talk about. Personally, I think the entirety of Stone Ocean is essentially one final ride for Araki in this version of the universe he created. What I mean by that is the differences in storytelling that we've seen throughout JoJo. Parts 1 and 2 feel much different to Part 3, which is where I think the second era of JoJo began. With the introduction of stands, the format, while obviously having some creative additions and alterations, has remained quite similar ever since, and I think that Stone Ocean is the ending to that tale. And I think there's a particular detail that cements this idea of this story coming to an end. The story of JoJo begins on a rainy night, where Dario Brando came across the crashed carriage of the Joestars, the event that set the rest of the story in motion. And the very last panel of Part 6, we see a rainy day, taking this story full circle. And I think the whole resetting the universe thing holds much more meta meaning than I think many people give it credit for. I genuinely believe that it was Araki just telling us that he wants to try something new. He's been writing the manga since 1987. That's 34 years at the time of writing this video. Even though the man never ages, I think it's perfectly understandable that he just wanted a change. And with how the story had developed so far, I think there weren't really too many other ways of somehow reigniting that original Joestar and Dio rivalry. Hence, no matter how you look at it, we would have gotten some kind of bittersweet story regardless. And again, I think the whole resetting the universe ending is much more of a meta thing. Sure, the Part 6 story could have worked without the universe being reset at the end, but I think the a little more nuanced way of telling us that in this world Dio has been truly vanquished through Jolene no longer being a JoJo puts a much nicer bow on that. This is further backed up by the fact that Parts 7 and 8 take place in an alternate universe anyway. It's completely independent of the Part 6 ending. And I think another point to raise in connection to this that I've yet to bring up is how close to modern day Part 6 had already gotten. The very idea of the inherited Joestar soul automatically means that there has to be some length of time between each part. And if you look at the length of time between them, you'll see exactly what I mean. Part 1 takes place in the 1880s. The second part, almost 60 years later, begins in 1939. Part 3 takes place just 48 years later in 1987. Part 4 happens even sooner in 1999. And this trend continues all the way to Stone Ocean. Those years in between become shorter and shorter, and the Jotaro story is somewhat interwoven through all of them. If the theme of a new Joestar having to be born were to be continued, we would soon be far into the future, which, I don't know about you, I don't really want to see in a world like JoJo's. So with this in mind, Araki went backwards, which he cannot really do since the story already has a set in stone starting dates. So the only real solution if we want to see the story continue and change is an alternate universe. And I think you'll agree that Part 7 was very much worth having an alternate universe be created. Returning to Stone Ocean and forming somewhat of a conclusion. I think the mixed feelings some people have toward the ending is very much them feeling like the world they themselves in some capacity created was ripped away. As I mentioned before, I think this will always be a topic of discussion. There simply is no way to adapt source material into an animated format and please everyone. The way the characters sound, the way they act, etc., all exist in your mind, which creates this emotional attachment that cannot be replicated on screen. It can be close, even perfect for some, but it will never be for everyone. And on this note, I am very curious as to how anime-only crowds react to the ending. I'll go out on a limb and say that there will be some added explanation that the resets only affects everything regarding Pucci, and if this happens, I genuinely believe that the response will not be as negative, simply due to there being less of that personal investment. But those are just my thoughts. I think the ending was a nice, albeit bittersweet ending to this world of JoJo. It didn't affect the way I viewed the rest of the arc, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and if anything, made me more excited for the possibilities it opened up. But what do you think? Do you still hate it, even after reading Part 7 and Part 8? And if so, why? As long as the discussion is civil, I'd love to hear the opinions you might have. And that's the video. I've been meaning to return to JoJo on the channel, and I thought with the anime adaptation of Stone Ocean being just around the corner, this would be the perfect time to do so. That and Jolene's theme slaps super hard. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you did all the YouTube things to help with the blessing of the algorithm, and if you wish to support the channel even further, consider joining the Patreon where for as little as $1 per month, you can get access to all of the benefits. Speaking of which, massive shout out to our current patrons who allow me to produce even more content for you all. Seriously, thank you. Other than that, I want to say thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great day. And hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.